that we're studying in GLS is the phenomena of things that are represented like real works, which is an organization. It's a really interesting organization that guides kids, teenagers typically, in making stories about their lives. These are kids who typically struggle in schools, adolescents who really struggle in schools, and the idea is, how can digital media supplement and enhance people's ability to express themselves in new literacies when they struggle in the conventional ones? So we get movies like, let's see, well, it's not going to play for me.
I don't know why everybody seems to think I'm obsessed with Harry Potter, because I'm not, really, I'm not. A highly devoted fan? Yes. Obsessed? No. If I were obsessed, I would know trivial things about Harry Potter. Like, no one mentions Harry by name till chapter 4, page 47, line 11 of the American First Edition hardcover. But I don't know these things. That'd be the because of an obsessed mind, and I'm not obsessed.
Let's drink down a bottle of Felix Felicis. Then we'll go and bury a giant spider. We'll reveal ourselves to a Hogwarts professor. When we're sneaking out all these ideas seem so reasonable.
So yeah, cute, interesting. You know, a kid did it, basically trying to figure out how she articulated her the fascination with Harry Potter. This kid probably doesn't have a lot of problem with text literacies. But the interesting thing here is that we know a lot about the characteristics of essay writing in adolescent years. We know a lot of the characteristics of how you teach creative writing. What we don't know are principled ways of understanding media production in these kinds of spaces. Like what counts for learning and what counts for participation. How should participation in these kinds of spaces be structured? We're not really very clear about that yet. There are organizations that do the structuring, but one of the things that we're looking at in the participatory media studies is trying to figure out what are the rules for engagement in these kinds of world. And briefly, I'll show you a couple other ones that we've talked about. One of them is simulation, the ability to interpret and construct dynamic models of real-world processes. Now, I'll put this up here. Those of you who are mathematically inclined can follow along with us. Who caused this financial crisis? My humble suggestion, gamers caused this financial crisis. And here's why, right? Typically, financial analysis has, until the 2000s, it's been a pretty arcane subject, constructing investments that somehow map onto the real world. But we've gone completely away from the real world in the last 8 years. We've developed fund structures and investment strategies that are completely self-contained. They're very much like video games. They're very much like the sort of self-contained simulations that the goal of the simulation is to optimize how the simulation works, regardless of what it maps onto. I don't think anybody's really investigated this yet, but watching how these simulations have been crashing left and right because they don't correspond with the world has all the marks of people who never designed them to correspond with the world. So I think one of the implications of the gamer generation is that a lot of people who built those financial models are currently in their 20s and early 30s. And what we're going to find out is that games give you an extraordinary ability to manipulate complex symbolic systems. And one of the things we have to teach gamers is the thing we thought all along. Live in the real world, dude. Because if you don't, your models don't map onto anything. And once you get in positions of responsibility, this could be dangerous. The last one I want to talk about is the idea of transmedia navigation, the ability to follow the flow of stories and information across multiple modalities. And Steve mentioned a little bit that I've been doing some research on fantasy sports. Fantasy sports seem to be the perfect model for what university education of the future is going to look like. especially university education that aims to teach about complex systems, which most of you who are in the sciences, mathematics, sociology, this is one of the things you do, is teach about complex systems. Here's what fantasy baseball does. There's 3 levels of activity in fantasy sports. The primary activity, which is the actual game that you're watching. Then there's conventional fan activity, which has been around forever, right? Steve and I talked this summer a little bit about this, putting the weather at the first level, right? Everybody knows about the weather. Everybody has favorite weather websites and weathermen that they want to figure out if it's going to be sunny or not tomorrow. Everybody, well, not everybody's a Cubs fan, and thank God for that. But there's been fan activities that have been tethered to the primary activities forever. The interesting thing that fantasy activity gets you is the ability to interact with the primary activity in a way that's substantive, where as a person, you get to make predictions about models, about performance, that are the same kinds of predictions that people who are engaged in the primary activity do. So in our research, we found that the primary activities typically consist of complex data-rich domains that have discourse strategies and ways of interaction. The fan knowledge leads to the development of a fantasy game. The fantasy game draws on both fan knowledge but also prior knowledge about how you navigate complex systems. And the point of the fantasy game is to do hypothesis testing, to figure out whether your knowledge of the primary activity will enable you to make predictions about what goes on in that primary activity. Again, a really good example of how you can elicit prior understanding about complex system operation and then test the prior understanding against the actual operation of the system. So our idea is that articulating the structures that are represented in fantasy games provides a really nice model for how folks who are trying to teach about other complex systems could develop learning environments that are both participatory and driven by media spaces. One last one I'll go through really quickly is this idea of distributed cognition. This is a project that I've been working on in the last year or so. The ability to interact meaningfully with tools that expand mental capacity. And I just talked with David right before the session today. What we want to do in our project is figure out how handheld technologies can affect the lives of K-12 teachers. K-12 teachers, for those of you who study the K-12 world, they get no help. They get no support. They get dumped on all the time. All the technologies that they could possibly use are banned for them. They have no literacy that's relevant for the schools. Our idea is, can you build handheld technologies that allow teachers to participate in distributed cognitive environments as well? So we developed this application for iPhones for teachers to collect information on kids as they're teaching. The iPhone has really good affordances for that because it's quick, it's touch-based, you don't have to do a lot of text entry. If you design the interface right, you can get a lot of information really quick. We're about to pilot this tool in a school district just outside of Madison, Mount Horeb, this spring, and hopefully we'll be able to distribute it through iTunes later in the spring. And the more we show tools like this, the more people who are involved in positions like you immediately see, yes, of course, I could use that too. So what we're trying to do is spark the development of participatory media technologies to create distributed cognitive environments where they typically don't exist, but where they would flourish. A little bit over, but that's okay. So what I tried to do this morning is just give you a sense of where contemporary games are in the area of creating immersive environments for people to participate, and then where we are as a group to talk about the kinds of technologies that we're developing and exploring. And I'm sure you'll get a chance to see through the rest of the day how each other are working with these same sorts of ideas to create compelling learning environments for you and for your students. Thank you.